Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Lene and I'm a knitter from Norway, and today I'm going to do a Q&A. I asked on Instagram and on YouTube if you had any questions for me, and I got some, so I'm going to answer those. I got questions in 3 categories: work, personal life and knitting. So I'm going to be answering questions from those categories, and while I do that, I have my knitting with me, the Violetta pullover by Knit, because I really want to knit while I answer these questions, and I am so in love with this project that I just can't get myself to knit on anything else. So hopefully I'll be able to knit on this, even though it is full on lace, cables, everything. So fingers crossed I'll be able to both answer questions and knit on this. But I thought I'd start with answering questions about work, because that's definitely what I got the most questions about. And I'll start with the first question: do you work? And this question I honestly had to do a double take, because the first thing that plopped into my mind when I read the question was no, because I'm so used to answering that I don't work, that I'm a stay-at-home mother, that I stay home. But I had to think about it again, and then I realized that I do actually work. I've started working now in the last few months, so now I also work. I work at a farm, and I've gotten a lot of questions about that farm. One of those, are you a farmer when you're not knitting, or do you have another profession? And I must say the answer is kind of neither, because I'm not a farmer, I just work at the farm, and I also don't have any other profession. I do mainly stay at home with my son, and then I've started working at the farm just a couple of nights a week. And I also got a question: do you have farm animals? And again, I don't, they're not mine. And I got a question: is the family farm? And it is a family farm, it's just not my family's farm. It is a family that my parents are friends with. My father worked there before me, and now I work there. So it's definitely not a family farm, but my whole family, or my family's farm, but my whole family has worked there. I worked there a lot as a child too, because my father worked there. And I got a question about how do I manage work and taking care of my child. And I do bring my child with me to work. He could also be at his grandparents and aunt and uncle, but I really value all the things you can learn when working at the farm, where the food comes from, the circle of life, how to act around animals, to respect big animals. I think there are a lot of important life lessons really by working at a farm. And I started working at a really young age, almost younger than my son is now, when I was with my father. And I have so many great memories from being at work with my father, and growing up and working with him, and me starting to take more of the workload and him stepping down, and just that transition. I just loved all of it, and I really wanna be able to give that to my son, to have him see how it's like at the farm and how animals live, and just learn about that, and also teach him from a very young age how to work and work ethics and everything like that. And since I have so many fond memories myself, and both me and my fiance work in the same field, I thought it would be great to give that to my son too from an early age. So he's with me, but of course I work while I'm there, and some things he just can't do with me. So I like to have someone else there as well while I'm there, just to make sure that he doesn't get into anything dangerous, because on farms there are a lot of dangerous equipment, really big animals, a lot can happen in a really short time. So I either have my fiancé there with me, but he usually works when I work at another farm. So a lot of the time it's my sister that's there with us. And that's really great, because then she gets to be with my son. She loves being an aunt, so she takes every opportunity she can get. And my son also gets to be with his aunt and join me to work. So I feel really privileged that we're able to do that. I also got some question if I can talk more about the work. And I can, but I think it's really hard to talk about, because I've searched most of my life, because I've had this job a lot, and I've asked my English teachers, everyone, what is the appropriate English word for the Norwegian word for the occupation. In Norwegian we call it avløser, so I'm a avløser. I go there and work, but I just don't know what the name is. I'd say it's almost close to being a milkmaid. I was also a milkmaid before I had my son, up in the mountains of Norway, and that was lovely, very idyllic. I definitely want to do that again with my son too. My parents did that when I was a kid too. But I'd say the work that I do now is quite close to being a milkmaid, but it's like on the farm. But you go there mornings and evenings. I only do evenings now because of my son, and the mornings are just too early. You go there, make sure the cows are milked, feed them, make sure everything is sanitary, feed the calves, just look after everything, and that usually takes about 2 to 3 hours. So that is what I do at work. I don't know, it's quite hard to explain. It's a very solitary sort of job. You don't really see anyone else, because the reason you're there is to give the farmer a break, and it's usually on a schedule. So I work one day, and then the farmer works one day, and then someone else works another day. Or you work that week, and then the farmer works the next week, and then someone else works the next week. It's really common for avløsere, or whatever you would call it, to have a few different farmers. So one week they're at that farmer's farm, and then the next they're at another farmer's farm. So kind of rotates where they're at. But since I don't work a lot, I only work at that farm I've worked at all my life. So I hope that explains some. I just think it's really hard to explain it in English, but that's what I do for work. And then I also got a question: how do you take care of your child and knit? Knit so much, because I do get quite a lot of knitting time, and I am very fortunate because of the job that me and my fiancé have. We work, or I only work evenings, but he works morning and evenings. So all throughout the day we are 2 adults at home. So now that I'm filming, for example, he's with my son, so I can film and knit. And during the day as well, since we are 2 adults at home, I can sit back and knit for a while, even though we're usually all in the same room. But I can sit back, relax and knit, or he can go work out. We can just tag in and tag out a lot more, because we always are 2 adults at home, or at least most of the time, because of the way we work. So I feel very, very fortunate that we have the jobs that we do, that allows us to be 2 adults at home all day. He is usually back from his morning shift at the farm almost before we wake up. So and then he leaves when I'm about to put my son to bed, when the nights that only he works. So we get a lot of time together and a lot of time where the whole family is together. So that really allows me to knit a lot more than if I were alone with my son all day while he had a day job. So that is most of the reason why I get so much knitting done and also take care of my son. Another is that I knit quite fast, so I get more knitting done in less amount of time, and also I've knit all of my son's life next to him, so now that I'm knitting he finds it quite fascinating and he wants to look. Maybe I give him a pair of circulars so he can pretend that he's knitting too. So all of that buys me more knitting time, but I have to say the fact that we are 2 adults at home most of the time is the main reason. And another reason I get a lot done is that I stay up. I stay up a lot. I'm trying to get better at that this year. It's one of my New Year's resolutions, but one thing I do to get more knitting done is that I stay up through the night, usually till like 2, 3, 4 a.m. just to get some alone time to knit, because even though we are 2 adults home, everyone's at home all the time, everyone's on top of each other, so sometimes I just want to stay up after everyone's gone to bed, be completely alone, because that doesn't really happen. So I do stay up through the night regularly, and then I of course get a lot of knitting done. The nights are the best hours for knitting, and I did get a question on that. How do you stay awake through the night to knit? And I do usually watch TV or listen to an audiobook, something like that, but also I am a night owl all my life. If I'm not very particular about bedtime, I end up staying up way too late. That it's been that way for as long as I can remember, so I think it just comes really easily to me. But also I think now it is because I do really crave that alone time where I am totally alone and just have the space to think. And I don't know, to me being all alone is quite important. Just to have some hours where you're alone, not necessarily child-free, just away from everyone, and that's the easiest to get in the middle of the night. So I really enjoy just staying up and being all alone. Knowing that everyone else is asleep is such a wonderful feeling, but I am trying to get better at not being up so late, because I have to get back up in the mornings with my son, so it's definitely hard to balance getting enough time alone and also getting enough sleep. But I don't know if I have any good tips on how to do it. I guess if you just want it, it happens. And also some people are morning birds and some are night owls, and I'm definitely the latter, while my fiance gets up in the mornings really easily. So some people are just different, but watching TV and audiobooks and knitting, all that at the same time, really helps me stay awake. Moving my fingers, watching something, definitely makes it easier to stay awake. So that's how I stay awake. Another question I got is, how did you and your fiancé meet? And we met on Tinder. I feel like that's such a boring answer, honestly. I feel like everyone nowadays has met on Tinder or some sort of dating app, but that's where we met. I think it is 4 years ago now. That's it's gone so fast. I can't even imagine 4 years is a lot. But we met on Tinder, and I don't know, I don't think that's really a fun answer, but what is really funny to me at least is that when we got to know each other and learned more about each other, we realized that we had worked at the same farm, the farm I work at now. We had both worked there for, I think, the past 5 years that both had worked there. But we had never known each other's name, never knew anything about each other. So I just think it's really fun how many coincidences there are in life, that we worked there for so many years and never knew about each other, and then met each other on Tinder and realized that we had worked at the same place all those years. And I also got a question about if we have any future plans, family, work, life, anything like that. And of course the biggest plan we have is to get married. We're hoping to get married, we're trying to plan it, we're not very good at it, just putting it off all the time, but we are hoping to get married. I'm hoping to knit my wedding dress, so that's like the main plan, and of course that takes up a lot of time and takes priority, so we're not really planning anything else. We would love to remodel the house a bit, but I think that's all the plans we have. We are not really big planners, but to get married and remodel the house a bit would be great. And then I also got a question of how many children would you want to have, and I have one now, and I think I'd love to have 3. I have 2 siblings, we are 3 children, and I think that's been great. I think a family of 5, and that's always been like what I've envisioned all my life, so I would love to have 2 more children. Also to knit all the tiny baby clothes again for my own children would be great. So I think 2 more, 3 in total would be my ideal number. I also got a question about how many countries I've traveled to, and I'm not very well traveled. I am a homebody. I think I've been to 3 other countries, and 2 of them are Sweden and Denmark, and I feel like that almost doesn't count, because Sweden and Norway and Denmark is basically the same and they're very close together. But I've also been to England once with my grandparents, so that's like the one time I feel like I have really traveled. Other than that, I am very much a homebody. My family traveled to Paris once, but I would rather wanted to stay at home with my cat, so I've not traveled a lot, but I've been to those 3 countries. But I think those are all of the like personal questions, and then the rest of the questions are knitting questions. So one of them is selfish knits or baby knits, and that's a very hard question because I love this selfish knit, this one, and I make a lot of knits for myself. But there's just something about those baby knits, those very little pieces, the first thing a baby wears when they're born. There's just something special about that. And even though I love knitting for myself or knitting for my like adult friends, nothing can quite compare to knitting for a baby if it's knitting for your own or someone else's. So I think I'd have to say baby knits, just because there is nothing quite like it, and I don't think I could ever let that go. I also got a question with all the amount of time you spend knitting, if I'm dealing with any wrist pain. And I've actually never had any wrist pain when it comes to knitting. I don't know if it's because of the way I knit or something, but when I feel pain because of knitting, it's never been in my wrist. I get it in my fingers, these two fingers here, and in my knuckles, but it's like this part of my hand that I might feel it in. Other than that, I never feel it. I think I'm knitting in a way that doesn't give me a lot of pain, but I also know that some needle sizes and types gives me a lot more pain than others. And when I was knitting my Moby Sweater, for example, with that crisscross thing at the front, that also can give me a bit of pain in my fingers. But if I knit on different projects and get a bit of variation, and if I don't knit on too big needle sizes, I don't really feel pain ever. And if I just knit stockinette, I can knit for days, just non-stop, and I'll never feel it, as long as it's on small enough needles. So I think I'm just fortunate, and that I also have a knitting style that is kind to my hands. And then I got a question about what's my favorite knitted garment for baby boys, and that is such a hard question because I love so many different garments for completely different reasons. It's very hard to choose just one, but I think I'd say petiteknit, because I think she has a lot of great baby patterns, but I don't know what I would say is the absolute best. I think the thing I got the most use out of is the Williams overalls, but those are very basic if you want something that looks a bit better, or more festive, more special. I don't know. I also love the Friday sweater. I absolutely love that. That was, I think, one of the first thing I ever put on my son. I think that's why they're so special to me, because like the first real knit outfit I made my son and that he wore was the Friday sweater and the Williams overalls, so that will just always have a special place in my heart. But I would say like the best thing for babies is the thing they will actually wear. I also love the Selma sleep suit. Yeah, I think I'd say those three. I can't really pick one favorite, but those the two first are really special to me because those are what my son had first. But the Selma sleep suit also is such a game changer, especially if you live somewhere a bit cold. I'd recommend that to absolutely everyone. Let's see. And I got the question, what is my favorite knitting project ever? And that's also such a hard question. It's almost impossible to pick out one favorite because I feel like every time I knit I get a new favorite. But of course the first few things I made my son is really high up on that list just because they're so special to me. But I think also like the Moby Sweater and this Porcelain sweater are favorites because they really challenged me and I was really afraid before starting them, and they gave me a lot of confidence and just trust in myself that if I just decide to do something I'll be able to do them. And they learned me a few different techniques, and I really appreciate when I learn something new. So I think since the Porcelain is the newest, maybe I'll say that that's my favorite project because it's so pretty. I learned a lot, and yeah, it's one of the more special pieces I have. I usually make quite similar items or the same thing again and again and again, but this is something completely different. So maybe this is my favorite knitting project ever. I also got quite a few questions about when I started knitting, how I started knitting, how I learned to knit. And I thought I would do an own video all about my knitting journey, because my parents have saved all of the knits I made when I started knitting and throughout my childhood. So I thought I could do a video showing all of that if you're interested and like talking about my knitting journey. But I'll answer this question. I did start knitting when I was about 5 years old. That's at least the earliest picture I can find of me knitting. And I learned from my grandmother mainly, but when I was a child, like everyone around me was knitting. My mother knit, my grandmother knit, my aunt knit, and even my father knit. He started knitting when I was born because he has said he couldn't just sit around looking at me. He had to have something to do. So he learned himself to knit as well. So my whole childhood I was just surrounded by knitting. So I wanted to learn, and I can't really remember how I learned, but I learned from my grandma, and then some things I've learned myself, like how to cast on, because no one had the time to teach me that day that I wanted to learn it. So I just sat with my needle and some yarn until I got loops, and that's how I cast on still. But the main part of my knitting I've learned from my grandma, and then of course now the last time I started knitting and started following patterns and doing a lot of petiteknit, I've learned a lot of new techniques and new ways of knitting. So now I'm actually visiting my grandma when she has problems with reading patterns, or my mother, and I help them with their knitting. So it's been really fun from me learning from them, and now I'm giving it back. But yeah, if you want me to talk more about my knitting journey, see what I made in my childhood, just me talking through the like evolution from my childhood to here, let me know and I'll do a video all about that. But that's like when I started learning to knit and how I started learning to knit. And I also got a question about who are my favorite YouTube knitting podcasters, and I love a few different ones. I really enjoy aka Nora Knit. She's the newest podcast I've found, and I really enjoy her whole vibe. So that's a podcast I really enjoy. I also really enjoy Well Love Knits and Typical Bliss. I love Laura Penrose and what's Alexandra's Garn. So those are some of the ones that I listen to, but I'd love more suggestions to knitting podcasts, because those are really great to watch when knitting and to get inspiration for other things that I want to knit. So if you have any suggestions, please let me know. And then I got a question about the average time it takes me to finish a knitting project, and that's quite hard to answer. I do always in my head think when starting a project, okay, I think this will take me that amount of time, then I'll be done by then, but I'm not usually right. I think I'm still thinking like I did when I was a monogamous knitter, but now I knit on so many things at the same time, so everything takes a bit longer. But I'd say for this one, if I were to just knit on this one, I'd say it would take me about a month, maybe 3 weeks to a month. for this very structured sweater in my size, a stockinette sweater in my size, I'd say about 2 weeks. A baby sweater. Oops, I've run out of mohair for my knitting. I have to go back. A baby sweater I usually think will take me like 3 to 4 days to a week. Baby socks take me about an afternoon. Adult socks take me about 5 days. That's at least how long I imagine it takes me, at least if I work very much on that certain project. But it very much depends. For this one, for example, I just did the color and then I didn't touch it for almost 2 weeks. But I don't usually count that time because that's not time spent knitting. But all the days I'm actually knitting on this are the days I'm counting. So that's how I count how long my projects take. And then I got a question about what are some skills or tips I wish I had when I was a beginner. And I was a beginner when I was a child. So I feel like that's a bit different because when I was a child I was very adventurous with my knitting. I didn't follow patterns. I just thought, oh my god, I want something, let's try to knit it. And then I just started and I frogged a lot, and frogging didn't bother me at all. I just knit and frogged and knit and frogged, and that was great. So honestly, when I was a beginner, I feel like that was when I was the most adventurous and open to learning new ways of knitting. So I wish I was more like that now. But my biggest tips, if you're a beginner, is to try to adopt that childlike curiosity and happy-go-luckiness where you just try your best, and if it doesn't work out, you just go with it, you rip back or try to find some way of fixing it. Since I ripped back so much, I frogged so much and just tried out so many different way of doing things. I feel like I learned a lot, both learned how I like to knit and what I like to knit, but I also learned new techniques because I just kept going until I was happy. So that is one of the things I wish I still had. So my biggest tips is to just knit what you love, do what you love, and try to just love the whole process of it. I was way better at that when I was a child, and I think that's the best tips for a beginner as well. I got a question as well if I want to start to learn sewing, because I have a sewing machine and I do really want to start sewing, but I have gotten I've grown into being a perfectionist as I've grown up. So learning new skills now is much harder for me, because if I don't get it right on the first try, I just give up. So for myself as well, as I'm going into being a beginner at other crafts, what I really want to get better at is that childlike curiosity where you just want to try things out and see how they work, and it doesn't really matter if it's perfect or not, just matters that you've tried. So that's a tips for myself and others, and I do want to start to learn sewing. I just don't know when yet, because it's quite daunting for me now to try new things. And then I also got a question about where I find my knitting patterns besides Ravelry, and I actually don't find any of my patterns on Ravelry. I usually find patterns on Instagram, and then I go directly through to the designer's website. So I don't think it's the best tip, but just scrolling through Instagram, knitting Instagram, and seeing whatever like sparks joy and you feel like, oh my god, I just have to have that. That's how I do it. I'm trying to get into Ravelry more because I think that would be a great way to expand and see smaller designers as well and see more different types of knitting, because Instagram is very much the same type of design over and over again by different designers. So, but that's how I do it, and I'm trying to get into Ravelry, but I don't really have any better tips. And then I got a question if there's a technique I'm too scared to try yet, and I think that must be steeking. I have lately, like the last part of 2023 and now the beginning of 2024, I'm trying to be more adventurous and really pushing the boundaries a bit and trying to knit things, even though I'm not super comfortable with all the techniques. But steeking is still something that seems so scary because you can't just frog back if you don't do it correctly. So I want to learn it, but that's something I'm super scared of. Also in my family, like, it's my grandma that does it. She does it for everyone. She does it for my mother, for me, for everyone. So maybe I'll learn from her, but she also thinks it's so stressful that when she does it, like, her whole house has to be empty, everyone has to just leave the premises when she's doing steeking because she finds it so stressful. So I would love to learn it, but yeah, it just seems very stressful. Then I also got questions for what's my favorite knitting technique, and that's a really hard question because it's just, there are so many different techniques, but I think I do really love stockinette. If I'm just going to choose one thing, I think it might be stockinette, just because it's so meditative. You can just do it, you can just go on forever with doing stockinette. So that's something I really love about stockinette, but also ribbing is super versatile. You can make anything with the ribbing. Also more knitting technique specific. I really like a German short rows, increases, left and right leaning increases. I love lace, cables. I've really grown fond of cables since working on my Moby and now this. Just there are so many fun techniques, so it's really hard to choose, but I think I don't know what I would choose, honestly, because it's just too hard. I like just how versatile knitting is. It's very hard to choose just one thing. But I also got a question with the knitting technique I become familiar with really recently that I just learned, and I think that must be color work on the purl side, because I have done color work before but never on the purl side, and I wanted to knit a porcelain sweater for months but put it off because of color work on the purl side. But when I knit this, I did so much color work on the purl side that I feel I became a bit familiar with it and it's not as scary now. So I think that's the thing I learned the most recently, but I feel with knitting, I talked to a knitting friend about this recently too, that with knitting, I feel like you learn something new all the time. Every time you do a new project, there's always something new, how you do color changes, how to do color work, just there's always something new to learn. So that's a really nice thing with knitting. I feel like I'm always evolving. But the thing I learned the most recently was color work on the purl side. And then I think the last question I'm going to do today is, why did you start YouTube and what's my favorite part about YouTube? Doing YouTube. And I originally started YouTube because I've always wanted to like have a track of what I've made, and I've always had the goal of like taking a picture of everything I make each year and posting it on Instagram as a diary there, but I've never gotten around to it. I always fall off. I'm not very good at doing Instagram, so I thought, okay, that doesn't work, why not try YouTube? And in the beginning I did one podcast a month where I gathered everything I had made that month and talked about it, yarn, pattern, and stuff like that. Of course, it took me some time to get comfortable in front of the camera, but that's why I started, just to have something to look back on, what I knit and what I've been doing through my... just to look back on, see what I've been doing in the past, and that's really great. And I have honestly gone back and looked at what I did back then, and I'm really happy I decided to go for it, because my favorite part about doing YouTube now is the community. I am a stay-at-home mother and I work a very solitary job, so I don't really see a lot of people. I don't have any colleagues, nothing like that. So having YouTube and having this community, having others to talk to, being able to share my craft with others that also love it, and talking about what we love, and yeah, just being able to talk to other adults has been really great. And that has been the best part with all of this, having others to talk to and that community, and yeah, finally feeling like I have someone else to talk to, because even though I love my alone time, it can get a bit lonely just yeah, being at home and with family. I see family and that's pretty much it. Sometimes I see a few friends, but that has been the best part about YouTube for me, definitely, to get knitting friends and people to talk to. So I'm very thankful for everyone who watches me and leaves a comment and has a chat with me. I am so thankful for this community and for everyone who wants to have a chat. And my DMs on Instagram is always open if anyone wants to talk. I would just be happy to have a chat with all of you. Yeah, that's what I love with knitting, the community and having all of these knitting friends. So I'm really thankful about that, and that has definitely been the best part of starting doing YouTube. But that is that's everything for this Q&A. I hope it was okay and that you got some answers to what you wanted, and that I didn't just blabber on. But now I am going to go continue to knit this. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and a comment. And if you want to continue seeing what I post, please subscribe. Bye!